All right, guys, today we're continuing our off-season content with another installment of our Buy Low, Sell High series. Today, we are going to get a little bit more nuanced and talk about the tight end position, a positional group of fantasy that has a very wide array of opinions. So whether you are in on the tight end positional scarcity and want to buy those high-end tight ends, or if you think they're just a Band-Aid and like to punt the tight end position, we have some options to buy low for you today. So as always, like the video, comment down below what you think of these lists of buy low tight ends. Subscribe to the channel if you're new here, and I'll see you on the other side of that intro. Welcome back into Twin Takes Fantasy Football. Today, we are going to go into another installment of our Buy Low series. Today is all about talking about the tight end position, and even more so than running backs in recent years, this is a position where you have just such a wide berth of opinions surrounding the tight ends in the league. Some people think you need to go all in, draft a very high-end tight end early on in the draft and secure that position, while others think that because of the lack of positional value as far as fantasy production for tight ends, that you can really punt the position and use a lot of band-aids towards the end of your draft to really secure your team while you focus on positions of more importance, whether that's wide receiver or running back. But whatever your opinions are on tight ends, whether you're in Dynasty looking for some sneaky offseason buys, or whether you're preparing for your redraft or best ball leagues, we have a few tight ends to talk about that will cover the gambit and get you all prepared to win your 2023 fantasy championships. So without further ado, let's jump in. We're going to start with a very high-end tight end, and honestly, my favorite tight end this particular offseason, and that is the Eagles tight end, Dallas Goedert. This guy, in my opinion, is a top 3 tight end in Dynasty at the current moment. He falls in at number 3 behind the obvious selections of Travis Kelce at 1 and Mark Andrews at number 2. I really cannot fathom why people think that TJ Hawkinson, Kyle Pitts, even George Kittle should be ranked ahead of Dallas Goedert just based on the information that we've been given in this past 2022 season. Dallas Goedert was, even with all the the Eagles offensive weapons healthy, Dallas Goedert was still the second most targeted player in that offense behind A.J. Brown. He was even out targeting Devontae Smith. So even with all the insane number of playmakers that the Eagles have, he was still a very productive tight end, especially on a per game basis. He was a tight end 2 in 2022 in per game scoring at the tight end position. And again, he's just attached to a really dynamic and high scoring offense. Eagles top 5 in offensive efficiency and points scored in 2022, and you always want to have assets that are associated with offenses like that. He won't be cheap, I promise you that. He's not going to be as cheap as any of the other guys on this list, but his value will continue to go up. He is 28. Not a spring chicken by any means, but with Travis Kelce aging into his age 34 season, I do think that this is the prime of Dallas Goedert, and you can acquire him and still get 3 to 4 to 5 years of solid production out of him. And if you're going to compare him to TJ Hawkinson, clearly Dallas Goedert, TJ Hawkinson hasn't signed a long-term contract as of right now with the Minnesota Vikings. Dallas Goedert already has signed an extension. He's going to be secure with the Philadelphia Eagles going forward. The quarterback situation with the Eagles is much more secure. Hayden Hurst just signed a 5-year contract. TJ Hawkinson has currently Kirk Cousins, who is probably not going to be with the Vikings next season. Kyle Pitts, obviously, we've seen the struggles around him. He just really hasn't been able to put it together as far as production goes. They drafted Bijan Robinson. The Atlanta Falcons did, number 8th overall. It's truly a run-dominant system, and they just don't have the quarterback, whether it was Marcus Mariota or Desmond Ridder last year, to really provide him with enough volume and target share for him to be productive. And George Kittle, not only is he part of an offense that it's run heavy, same issue that Kyle Pitts faces in Atlanta, but it's also a lot more weapons that he has to deal with. He has to contend with Christian McCaffrey, Elijah Mitchell, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, and we've seen last year Brock Purdy, who I think is going to be the starting quarterback for the 49ers. We saw last year that he didn't really take that many pass attempts per game. He was averaging 16 pass attempts per game. It was really a more run-dominant game. Yes, George Kittle had a couple good games here and there, but it was really 28 points or it was 0 points. He really left you with some stinkers going down the end. So this is why I am all in on Dallas Goedert. If you can flip any of those 3 guys I mentioned for Dallas Goedert, I'm doing it in a heartbeat. I don't think any price right now is too expensive for Dallas here. Moving on to our second tight end. It's a former NFC East tight end. It's going to be Dalton Schultz, the newly acquired tight end for the Houston Texans. And I always like to predicate, if I am punting the position, if I can't get one of those high-end tight ends, I always try to target the storyline around figuring out which tight ends are going to break out or be good as like punting the position. I always try to target tight ends that are associated closely with rookie or neophyte quarterbacks. I took Mark Andrews when it was Lamar Jackson's first year. Last year, I was very much in on Noah Fant, as documented on this channel, because it was Trevor Lawrence's second year. So we all know that the narrative is that tight ends are a safety blanket for the quarterback position, especially with rookie and younger quarterbacks. And CJ Stroud is going to be a rookie quarterback, and nothing really in the wide receiver room of Houston scares me at all. I mean, you have the ghost of Robert Woods. You have Tank Dell coming in, who I really do believe is more of a gadget player, standing at a towering 5'8". I don't believe he'll be truly effective in the NFL the way he was at Houston. You have John Mechie, who's still quite a big unknown, despite having second round draft capital. He comes off a year in which he was recovering from leukemia. And then you have sixth round draft capital in Xavier Hutchinson. So none of those offensive weapons are ones that I think are going to truly dominate the target volume. And I think Dalton Schultz coming in, being an experienced tight end, a great pass catching weapon, is going to be very beneficial for CJ Stroud during his rookie campaign. I think truly the value with Dalton Schultz is, he had a great year 2 years ago, but last year really frustrated a lot of managers. Obviously, part of that was due to the injury sustained during the first 3 weeks of the season, and then just wasn't very productive with Dak Prescott when he got back on the field. So that injury dip, you can definitely buy that injury dip. And again, if you look at Dalton Schultz and what he does as far as production per his cost, outside of the top 4 guys, in my opinion, outside of the TJ Hawkinson, Dallas Goedert, Travis Kelce, and Mark Andrews, the production per cost of a Dalton Schultz is higher than guys like a Kittle, like a Kyle Pitts, like a Darren Waller, like a Pat Freiermuth. He's just going to be very, very cheap. And if you can't secure any of those top tight ends, or you're not willing to pay up for the positional scarcity and overvalue a Freiermuth or a Darren Waller, Dalton Schultz is a great cheap Band-Aid that you can get for an extremely cheap price. Maybe, he's going off the board way late in drafts, so this is great for those best ball maniacs. And you could probably steal him away for a third in some in some dynasty leagues as well. So moving on to our third tight end is going to be very, very similar situation to Mr. Schultz. It's going to be Hayden Hurst. And in my notes here, I literally just have copy paste Dalton Schultz's information here to Hayden Hurst. Despite him being a little bit older, the situation is eerily similar to what Dalton Schultz is facing. Again, Bryce Young comes in as a rookie quarterback, and we all know the narrative around tight ends being rookie quarterbacks' best friend. They're their safety blankets, and I think having an offensive-minded coach in Frank Reich will know how to utilize that to the skill set of Bryce Young. And, we've seen it with the 2 tight end sets that Frank Reich used to like to utilize, both in Philadelphia and in Indianapolis, that, tight ends are a very big part of his offense. And Hayden Hurst being brought in on a solid 3-year contract means, they do definitely have plans for him. Obviously, the same thing that goes with Dalton Schultz in the wide receiver room in Houston applies to the Panthers wide receiver room. You have Terrace Marshall Jr., who hasn't really established himself over the past 3 years there in Carolina. You have Adam Thielen, who is way on the wrong side of 30 years old. You have DJ Chark, who was brought in, not a scary free agent acquisition. And then you have Jonathan Mingo, the rookie wide receiver in the second round. None of those guys I think are going to demand an enormous target volume away from Hayden Hurst. And I think he definitely has the opportunity to establish himself with a significant amount of targets in that offense. He might not have the same injury concerns that Dalton Schultz has, but, he bounced around quite a bit. He went from Baltimore down to Atlanta, went to the Bengals last year, and now ends up in Carolina. So with a little bit of the age, with a little bit of bouncing around, you can definitely buy that dip. Again, very similar price. Even as far as drafts go, much, much lower down the draft board than a Dalton Schultz, but I think about the same price in a dynasty league. If you're going to probably pay out a third rounder, I'm definitely okay with paying that for Hayden Hurst. And I definitely think he's worth that value. You've seen, not that the production has been consistent, but he has had those games where he, can put up those 18 to 20 point fantasy games, and is truthfully a better than average tight end when he's seeing adequate target volume. So again, another one of those guys that at the end of drafts, or, if you just need a really cheap Band-Aid, for your dynasty leagues, he's a guy I would target for when you can pay little to nothing for him. Moving on to a guy, Chigozie Okonkwo, if I could say that properly. I don't know if he's really a buy low candidate anymore. A lot of the dynasty heads, a lot of the real savvy numbers guys, the stats analysts, the guys that go, the yards per route run or yards after catch or air yards. Chigozie Okonkwo has those metrics that have him breaking out and are alongside, the same yard per route run metric as like a Kelsey and a Mark Andrews. So I think Chigozie Okonkwo's value has been inflated a little bit by the stats. I don't think that means he's a terrible tight end by any means. Obviously, he's on this list for a reason. I think he was incredibly talented coming out of University of Maryland, and I think he did provide quite a bit of value at the tight end position with the Tennessee Titans. He definitely passed the eye test for me as someone who was incredibly athletic and was a guy that could hold up to the bumps and bruises of the NFL landscape. So also, there's the fact that, same as we talked about with Hayden Hurst and Dalton Schultz, there's very little targets or competition for targets in the wide receiver room. You have Kyle Phillips, you have Treylon Burks, who had a very disappointing rookie season, and obviously a lot of the game is going to be run through the running back position with Derrick Henry and the newly acquired Tajay Spears. But as far as the passing game goes, I think Chigozie Okonkwo could have a very large target share of this maybe minuscule Tennessee Titans passing offense. I think you're going to have to pay a little bit higher. Maybe if you're in some home leagues with some not as savvy dynasty players or not as savvy fantasy football players, they won't really know the background metrics of Chigozie Okonkwo and why people are just targeting him so heavily for a breakout candidate. And I try to break myself away from a lot of the mainstream breakout and sleeper candidates, but it's hard not to mention this guy here as someone that you should be targeting, especially if you can acquire him for a decent price. I'd be willing to pay, a second rounder in Dynasty for him. If you can part with like a late second rounder or an early third rounder, that's a move that I would be very comfortable moving for Okonkwo here. And it's definitely, if he's being drafted in the 200s, that's absolutely ludicrous. I think when it comes around to draft season, he won't be this far. So if you're in best ball and this is where he's falling right now, this is an absolute steal. Moving on to our last tight end. It's a little bit of a shorter list. Obviously, with the positional scarcity of both tight ends and quarterbacks, these will be shorter videos, but I don't think anyone will mind having to listen to my voice a little bit less. However, Irv Smith Jr. here is going to be the last tight end on our list. And I just love the landing spot where he goes. This is a guy that's been, he's been primed for a breakout for the past 3 years. When he was with the Vikings, a lot of people were saying this is the year he's going to take over. He was going to step up. Obviously, a lot of people last year moving into a very tight end needy Jets team thought he was going to be the same, follow that same narrative to accompany a younger quarterback in either Mike White or Zach Wilson, as a tight end is a young quarterback's safety blanket and best friend, but it just never seemed to pan out, especially with Irv Smith's health. That's the biggest concern with him, and I can see a lot of managers being frustrated with the health concerns that he's had over his 4 years in the NFL. But it's just most of the situation. He is a very athletic tight end. He hasn't really put the production on the field, but he has had moments and flashes of brilliance, which I still think he can eventually put it all together. But with the position that he landed in, he goes to a very tight end needy team in the Bengals. They really didn't draft tight end position in the draft. They had Hayden Hurst last year, and they had subsequently moved on from him as he goes down and signs a deal with the Carolina Panthers. Tyler Boyd is going to be hitting a cliff here soon, just with his age, and I don't think that he's going to be as involved with offense as he has been in the past few years. Even when we saw Jamar Chase not on the field last year, Tyler Boyd really couldn't step up and play to the way he was even as recently as 2 years ago. So I think Tyler Boyd targets will translate to Irv Smith as he gets incorporated into this offense. T. Higgins, I think they're going to try everything in their power to retain T. Higgins on a contract here. I think they want to keep him as a Bengal, but, with the money that's being thrown on with wide receivers right now and him having to pay both Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow, at this point, they could be trading T. Higgins. And that's going to also open up a ton of targets for Irv Smith if that's something that comes to fruition this season or maybe even next season. And again, he's just tied to a top 3 quarterback in Joe Burrow. And we have to remember that Joe Burrow has been getting CJ Uzomah paid for the past 2 seasons based off of one great year with the Bengals. And I think Joe Burrow could certainly have that effect with Irv Smith as well. Again, a very, very cheap Band-Aid. Go out, acquire him for a 4th round pick. Maybe pick him up off waivers if he's there. Obviously, an insane best ball candidate here at the 325 position. So go out, snag him, and use him to be a quick Band-Aid if you need to cover up for a bye week, or if you just really want to punt the tight end position and are looking for some sleepers later on down the draft board. So those are 5 tight ends that I'm really targeting in a lot of my drafts that I think are going to be very beneficial for you to win your 2023 fantasy championships. Let me know if there's any guys I missed, or if you have don't think these guys are worth what I think they're going for right now, or if I'm way overvaluing them. I would love to debate with all you guys in the comments. But until then, and until next time, take care.